Thank you for being with us today. And if you could tell us what towns your family was from, or town in modern day Turkey.
Yes, what I've heard from my grandfather. My great grandfather was from Antep, which nowadays is Turkey. So obviously before the 19th genocide, they lived in Antep region, and after the genocide, they were forced to go through their Zor and come to Syria. And my grandfather was born in 1935. So they moved to Syria. And then my grandfather moved to lived in Africa, in Liberia for 10 years. And then worked in Liberia, Monrovia for 10 years. And then because of health problems, went back to Lebanon. And by that time, obviously, he was married and had 4 kids, including my dad. So he moved to Lebanon, and then in mid 70s, there was a civil war going on in Lebanon. So he lost everything that he had in Lebanon. So forced to go back to Syria, and obviously finally settled down in Aleppo, where obviously my dad was born. And I was born in 1991 in Aleppo, Syria. So my dad got married, obviously, 3 kids, and we were living in Aleppo. Obviously, had our house, had our business, and everything in Syria. So 3 generations of Armenians in Syria. In 2007, my dad sort of wanted to take his family and move outside Syria. And in 2009, January, 7th of January, 2009, we actually moved from Syria and went to Australia when I was 17 years old. And the reason for that being is because my dad we didn't want to go to the army, because in Syria, how the rules are. If you have an older brother or a younger brother, you have to serve the country for 2.5 years. So we sort of didn't want to do that, just because we didn't want to protect the country that's not of ours. So we wanted to move and start a new life. So in 2009, we moved to Sydney. So yeah, I don't know if I went.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That was really interesting to hear a couple of the things you said. Like, first of all, the constant moving, like from Aintab to Syria to Liberia to Lebanon.
To Aleppo.
Yeah, so that's a lot. And then to Australia. I'm curious more about the Liberia part, because I haven't heard that so much from many genocide survivors that I know. Were there a lot of Armenians in Liberia?
I've sort of spoken to my grandfather, because he was a machinist. He was a very well-known machinist in Aleppo. So back in the 60s, so I think there was an opportunity for him to go to Africa to work in a big German company. That I don't know what, it was a big machinery company that I think produced iron or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but they sort of needed good machinists from Middle East or whatever the situation was back then. So the opportunity was in front of him, and he took it. So he moved to Africa, and he had a very successful 10 years. And I think if he didn't have health problems, he wouldn't have came back. But because of health issues, he was forced to. He had the operation done in Switzerland, and they end up sending him back to his own country because of health issues. So I don't know if there was. He's spoken to me about his friends, Armenian friends. So I'm sure there was a little Armenian community in Africa, but I'm not sure if they had schools or churches, or how big was the community, how many people was the community. So I wouldn't know. Don't me say that bit again.
Um, so, thank you. That was really interesting. So then, you were born in Syria in Aleppo.
Mm-hmm.
In which part?
In Aleppo, our house was in Suleymania
Okay.
suburb, region. We were born there, yes. And we were in that sort of suburb until we left Syria.
And are there a lot of Armenians in that
Oh
area?
yeah, yeah. There was, I don't know if you probably haven't been to Aleppo. You wouldn't know. There's like a couple of suburbs. Aleppo is not small city. It's I think the second largest city after the capital Damascus, and majority of Armenians in Syria were in Aleppo. Uh, I think before the time that we left Syria, there's like around 100,000 Armenians. And where I lived, there's North Kyiv, like Suleimania and Aziz, like very close suburbs. Each suburb is like a couple of streets. It's not a big suburb, but there's a lot of Armenians, like thousands upon thousands of Armenians. The school that I went to, it was a private Armenian school of 3,000 Armenian kids. So it was a very tight and close community in Aleppo.
And so, just tying it with the genocide, how in your community was the genocide commemorated every April 24th?
Oh, April 24 was a very important day for us Armenians. Even Arabs, even Muslims knew that Armenians wouldn't work on 24th of April. So what we would do, we'd close the shop. We wouldn't go to work on 24th of April, and we had 8 churches in Aleppo, 8 schools I think, and 8 churches back then. So we used to go to the church, and we have a service ceremony like mass, and we would remember the lost souls of our forefathers and ancestors, and pay our respect that day, but not going to work, and our customers and people, Arabs who lived in Syria and Aleppo, they always knew that, so and they would respect that.
That's great. Maybe they didn't, but did any of your neighbors, like Syrian, non-Armenian neighbors, ever close their shops too?
I wouldn't say but they would know and they would respect that this is a big deal for us, because Armenians are very proud people, and 24th of April is something very important for us. In our calendar, 24th of April is a big deal for us. So I don't think they would close their shop, but they would know that they would respect that we don't work on that day.
That's really good. It's really amazing. So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about, you were mentioning your school, so your childhood, your education, and your family and growing up in Syria.
My childhood, obviously, Middle East is different than the West. My grandfather, Sarkis, I told you he ended up being settled down in Syria and Aleppo. So he started a business, and then my father sort of grew that business. He was in the business. So growing up myself, I always wanted to I always had a passion to continue the work that my dad is doing, which is the continuation of my grandfather's business. So for me, I went to school. Lazar Najarian, was the school that I went to, private Armenian school. But I went up to year 9, and then my dad needed me in his business because the business was growing. So I focused my career onto my dad's business, and I was getting ready to do business in the future in Europe, but which didn't end up the way I wanted because we left Syria. But I went up to year 9 and I quit my school, so I dedicated my life to that business. That's what I did. But my brother and my sister, they continued going to university, which also got interrupted because we left the country. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And what was it like? Your school was all Armenians, or there were also non-Armenians in your school?
I would say all Armenians. I might remember 1 or 2 non-Armenians, but they grew up with us. We know that they're not Armenians because their names are Sarkis or Hagop or Kebop or Nareg.
Right.
It's the Arabic name with no yan at the end of the surname. But some of the kids, they started from kindergarten with us. So they would speak Armenian the way I speak Armenian, as good as I speak Armenian. So a lot of Arabic, I also want to mention that a lot of Arab families, non-Armenian families, who grew up in an Armenian neighborhood in Syria. They spoke very well Armenian. Because if you have a town that has over 10,000 Armenians, they're going to be non-Armenian families who are going to have kids who speak fluent Armenian. Because we were, always on the street playing together, spending time together. So yeah.
So, would you say that when you were living in Syria, you felt more Armenian than Syrian, or how did you feel?
I've always been Armenian.
Right.
That's why it was so important. I'll tell you later about coming to Armenia. I've always felt Armenian because the day you open your eyes in an Armenian family, the first thing that you would know that you're Armenian before you know anything. Being Armenian obviously is very important for me. It's part of who I am. It's part of my identity as an Armenian. So obviously, being born in Syria, you have a Syrian passport, but I've always considered myself Armenian first, and then Syrian.
So what was it like interacting with non-Armenians in, well, maybe school, but also just in your community and around? You mentioned
In work, yeah. Look, most of our customers now was Muslims or Christian Arabs or Shiites or Sunnis. Look, now I don't know anything about the war because we left late 2008, early 2009. Growing up, most of my friends obviously were Armenian because I go to Armenian school, I go to Armenian church, I go to Armenian Bible studies. So my close friends and close circle of family and friends were Armenians. But I also had, because of work, non-Armenian Arab friends or customers or people who I interact with. But I never looked at them indifferently. Yes, they're not Armenians, but they are human beings. For me, everyone's equal because I believe God created everyone equally. For me, I don't show favoritism. I don't say you're Armenian, you're not because you're higher or lower. We're all human beings under the sun. But obviously, being Armenian, being more involved in the Armenian community, I would interact more with Armenians. But I never looked differently to an Armenian person. Yeah.
Did you, you mentioned religion a little bit. Did you go to church in Syria?
Yes, of course. I was Tabir. I don't know how you would say in English, but I spent a lot of time on Sundays. We would go to church. I'm close to my faith. And my dad is actually a pastor in a church. So faith also is a big part of who I am. As Christians, being first Christian nation. We accepted Christianity in 301, so the first Christian nation. So I was born in an Armenian Christian home. So being Armenian and being Christian, two things are, for me, they go parallel in my life. Yeah.
That's great. So if you want to maybe talk a little bit more about from when you left school to work and then up until when you had to leave, what that period was like, being a little bit older in Syria.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, when I quit school, I was 15 or 16, around that age. And within 12 months, I was taking care of the whole business because my dad used to go to Europe for business. So I was taking care of that. So I took a lot of responsibility at that very young age. So it was a challenging period in my life because it wasn't easy working with all the people in the business field, having to taking care of having a big responsibility on your shoulders and taking care of a business. But it was good. I think it helped me mature and grow as a person. It was almost 4 years from 15, 16 to up to 15 to 17, maybe 3.5 years until we sold everything and moved in 2009. So it's a good 3 years, but definitely challenging years.
Wow. And what do you think is one thing that you were most upset to leave when your parents and you decided that you were going to leave?
what's the one thing that
Or what's if you remember? Like, was there something like? Did you want to leave Syria, or was there something?
I personally, in the beginning, I was excited that I was gonna go, and then I realized what are the things I'm gonna leave behind,
Yeah.
and it made me obviously being 17, 18 years old. If someone tells you, yeah, we're gonna go to a new country, yeah, everything's good, but when you come face to face with reality, obviously being born in a country doesn't have to be Syria or anywhere in the world and live there for 17 years. You have a lot of friends, you have family. All my family is in Syria until this day. My grandfather, my uncle, my aunt, they all live in Syria. So we left by ourselves, five of us. So it's very hard, leaving my family. It was very hard. Leaving the church, leaving my friends, my family, leaving my business, but my dad's business, selling everything, our home, our cars, simple things. But most importantly, your family and your community, people is what you miss. And it was very hard to leave that behind.
What influenced the decision to go to Australia?
Why Australia is what you're
Yeah.
asking. Well, that was my dad's decision because my dad like he never liked Europe. He's been to Europe so many times. He doesn't like America. He doesn't like Canada. I don't know, for some reason you have to ask that to him. But when he went to Sydney in 2007, he fell in love with it. That was his decision, and he wanted to raise a family there. He wanted to continue his life with his family. Maybe he felt it would be safer for us. And it's a beautiful country. I myself, being living there for 9 years, I love it. But yeah, it was my dad's decision, and we just had to tag along, with him.
And so what was it like? Did you like Sydney?
Not in the beginning. Not in the beginning. Obviously, you can imagine the difference. Syria and Sydney. The only thing that they share is the first letter of the country is S, nothing else. You have a country that has a lot of people. We have 100 years of history. Armenians have 100 years of history in Syria, and especially in Aleppo. And Sydney is nothing close to that. Armenians start to go to Sydney early 60s, mid 60s. There's a community of 30,000 or maybe 35, and a community of 100,000. And Syria is this, Syria, Aleppo is this big, and Syria is much bigger. Sydney is much bigger. So it was very difficult for me because I didn't speak the language when I went to Sydney. I didn't have friends. And the community is very, very scattered in Sydney. So you can't just go out and call hug up Garva and people will come down from the building. It doesn't work that way. Like you meet someone, he lives like half an hour away from you. Like you need a car to get there. It was very difficult. It's a different community, different culture. It's where Armenians was very difficult, very different.
Yeah.
So it was a very difficult transaction. Like for me to get used to that life, it was very difficult. So I went through depression. It was very difficult for me, especially the first 2 years. As I said, I didn't speak a word of English, so it's very difficult. Not having friends, not driving a car, so getting a license, meeting new people. And so it's very difficult. But after 2 years, I sort of started to get used to it, and now after 9-10 years, I'm very happy. But the transaction wasn't easy for sure.
So could you tell me maybe what one of the biggest similarities you saw between the Armenian communities was, and one of the biggest differences between Sydney and Aleppo?
The biggest difference, look, I can talk maybe half an hour about this topic, but I would just like very quickly say, in Syria, there's no how can I put this? Like if I'm gonna go to my uncle's house or someone's at my friend's house, I don't have to call them. I just go upstairs, knock the door, like, Tanti, Sevan, I'm coming in, for example. Yeah, I'm hungry, give me something to eat or whatever. But no one does that in Australia. It's very official. You would have to call people. If you knock on someone's door, they'll open the door like, "What are you doing here? Why did you come?" No one was expecting you. So there's a lot of difference in that area. Uh, I would say that was very different. And people usually go to bed at 9:30 in Sydney. It's a more business country. People would have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They have to get ready, go to work, and everything's more disciplined. Where in Australia, when in Sydney, I didn't care. Like my mom, Aleppo, yeah, in Syria, Aleppo, Syria. My mom would wake me up 8:30, like son, wake up, have a breakfast, and go to work whenever you're ready. So life was very different. So that a lot of differences there. And what is similarities?
And is it between the Armenian communities, or you're saying in general?
I mean, I'm talking about the Armenian community in Aleppo, Syria, and Armenian community in Sydney, Australia.
Perfect, yeah.
So, and similarities, Armenians will get together wherever they go. Like, wherever we go, we create new Armenia. So, obviously, depending how big is the community. We built churches and schools in Aleppo, Syria. We did the same thing in Sydney, in Australia. We have a church. So I would say the similar things that wherever Armenians would go, would get together and build a church, and build a school, and build a community, and start, continue the Armenian language, the culture. So that's similar, different levels.
That was really interesting. I wanted to ask if you were part of any groups in Syria, like Armenian groups like AGBU or AYF, and if you joined those same groups in Sydney, and if they were different or the same at all.
I haven't. No, I wasn't too much involved in AYF or like things like that, because I was more in church groups, more in Bible studies.
Okay.
And I've been involved in Aleppo, Syria, and I used to go to church, and I used to go to Bible studies, and same thing in Australia, church Bible studies, and they're very similar. It's not much different, but I haven't been involved in AYF or any sport because since my childhood I always had a knee problem, and I ended up having a surgery, so I never was involved in sports or anything like that. No.
So, did you find any similarities or differences in the Bible studies?
I would say pretty much everything was the same. There's a lot of similarities there.
It was in Armenia.
Yeah. Well, language would probably be. In Syria, in Aleppo, in Syria, we don't speak Arabic, even though we live in an Arabic country, a Muslim country where the first language is Arabic. But actually, we never spoke Arabic. We all speak Arabic, but we never use it. If you're Armenian, I'm Armenian. There's no reason for me to speak Arabic to you. The influence of the Arabic language wasn't that strong for us because there were a lot of us and we all live close together. There's no reason for me to go to school and speak in Arabic to my friends or my relatives at home. So thanks for mentioning that. Actually, forget about that. The language would be the only difference. In Australia, the influence of the English language is very strong. Everything pretty much is done in English, the speaking and everything like that. It could be done in Armenian, but it would be much easier for everyone because some Armenians do speak Armenian, some Armenians don't speak. Obviously, me being from Syria, Aleppo, Syria, I would speak good Armenian, but maybe not the rest. So, the language was definitely different.
Do you think that the Armenian community in Sydney was still very close with each other, though, even though they maybe lacked some parts that you might have had in Aleppo?
Of course, it's not as strong as the community in Aleppo, Syria. It's because they are very scattered, as I said before. You would have an Armenian family living in Fairfield, another Armenian family living in Francis Forest, which is maybe over 30 kilometers away from each other. And we're not even 30 meters away from each other in Aleppo, Syria. So we are very scattered in Sydney. So, can you say the question again so I would answer?
Just if you think that the communities are still tight and close with each other, even though they might lack some elements that you had in Aleppo, like speaking Armenian or.
What's happening now? Well, after the war started, a lot of refugees came to Sydney, and that's actually helping. New families, a lot of families are arriving to Sydney, and they are keep saying, "Well, we have this. We used to have this in Aleppo. Why don't we start here? We had a like dance group. We had this group, that group, AYF. We're in different, different groups, different projects, different like more get-togethers, or things like this. So a lot of Armenian families have actually moved to Sydney for the last 4 or 5 years as a result of the war. They're actually bringing a lot of ideas, a lot of activities, from with them that they used to have in Syria, in Aleppo, or in Damascus. Now they're starting. Obviously, it's not the same. Armenia was more. We had a lot of activities. Obviously, a lot of more churches, more schools. There's a lot of activities going on. But in Sydney, wasn't that strong. But I believe I'm an optimistic person. I like to look, be positive, and I love it that a lot of Syrian. I'm very happy that a lot of Syrian, including some of my friends, actually came after the war, and they are very excited. They're like, okay, we are Armenians now in Australia. We want to start this, we want to start that. So yeah, I'm happy because of that. Just getting there.
Oh, wow. So maybe, could you talk a little bit about how your life changed, or if it did, how the war affected you, even though you were living in Australia? Did it affect you because of some family you had there, or because friends, or because people were coming to Sydney? How did the war touch you, if it did?
This is very close to my heart, this question, because I actually have a couple of friends, very close friends, who actually passed away, lost their lives protecting the country, or just passed away for different reasons because as a result of the war. We lost a lot of people, and it obviously did affect me. I was blessed enough that God took me away from that, and I started a new life. Even though it was very hard in the beginning, but it can't even compare to what my friends and family experienced during the war since 2011. So obviously it upset me, but I also think positive, and I say, okay, if a country is being destroyed, Armenians will spread. We experienced genocide 100 years ago. Maybe this is the second genocide. That's okay. Armenians will still go around the world. That means there are more Armenians around the world than ever right now. A lot of Armenians went to Canada. A lot of Armenians went to Europe. A lot of Armenians went to America, to Australia, and a lot of Syrian Armenians actually came to Armenia. So we are more scattered around the world. Maybe we'll be stronger. So obviously it affected me. It upset me, especially when you hear someone passed away in the war, or someone died in the war. You get upset, but if someone is your close friend, or you're a member of your family, it hits home. It upsets you. It brings you down. So and that was actually one of the reasons I decided to do Birthright, because I thought, I sort of looked at it this way: I don't deserve the life that I have in Australia. I moved there, I started a new life. God blessed me, God blessed my family, and I have a good life there. And here I am, my family and my friends, a lot of my close friends, who are lost their families, lost their houses, lost their jobs, lost their shops, their cars, wherever, lost their souls sometimes. They lost their lives, and they all scattered around the world, and I have to do something for them. And I thought the minimum that I can do, the bare minimum that I can do, is to pay respect to them, and quit my job and live my life, if you like, put it on hold for a little bit and come to this country. And that's why I'm volunteering with a Birthright, and here I am in Aleppo NGOs and helping the Syrian Armenians. And as I said before, to do the minimum, pay my respect to these people in any way I can. whether it's teaching English to someone or helping them, encourage them or giving them food or helping them financially, whatever it is that I can do, just to pay respect to these people. So yeah.
I'm sorry about your friends, and I really appreciate your efforts that you're making, and I think it won't go unnoticed.
Thank you.
I do want to move into your time here in Armenia, but I wanted to ask one more thing. And you were saying that the Syrian Armenians are now all over the world and they're more dispersed than ever. And I'm wondering, do you identify, like now you have an additional facet. You're not just Armenian or diaspora Armenian, you're Syrian Armenian. And do you think that what's happened now with the war has made you identify more as Syrian Armenian than you might have in the past?
Not really. I would say I've always considered myself Armenian because first of all, I think Armenian and I pray Armenian. Arabic and English comes from here, but Armenia comes from here. Armenian comes from here. So that's why I've always considered myself as an Armenian. Some people maybe wouldn't agree with me, but that is my personal opinion. And that's why I always lived as a foreigner outside Armenia. In Syria, we always said, yes, we are Armenians, yes, we are Armenians. But I never knew what Armenia would look like, I was away from the culture in Armenia. And then we moved to Australia, a totally different country, an English-speaking country, again, totally different. I always felt like a foreigner. Yes, I do respect the country that I live in. I love Syria and I love Australia. But I believe that there's a reason that God created me Armenian. So a big part of who I am, my identity, would stay Armenian. But I also, my family has a long history in Syria, so I would respect Syria and the country of Syria and the country of Australia. But yeah, I would stay Armenian until the day I die, I guess.
Had you ever been to Armenia before, right now?
Yes, in 2003, when I was 13 years old, and obviously my brother and my sister. My brother's older than me, my sister's younger than me. And my dad said we wanted to go to we asked my dad to take us on holiday. And my dad told us, first place that I want you guys to visit outside Syria is your motherland, is Armenia. I want to take you guys to see Ararat and your motherland. So in 2003, as first time as a whole family, we outside Armenia, outside Syria. Sorry, we came to Armenia and we spent a good holiday, a couple of weeks. We saw Armenia and went back. That was from Syria. After that, we moved to Australia, and this is the second time after 14 years of coming back.
And you said coming back. So do you feel that even though your family's from Aintab, which is no longer Armenia, you think that you're still coming back when you come to Armenia?
Of course. As I said, we're a blessed nation. I believe that we do have Armenia. Yes, we lost a lot of our lands, but we still have an Armenia. I can come back. I can get on an airplane and get a ticket and come back to Armenia, where there's a lot of other nations who have languages, who have their own religion and stuff like that, but they have no land to come to. You have Assyrians, you have other nations, but that they don't have lands. But I believe that we are a blessed nation that we still do have, even though it might be too small compared to before, but we do still have Armenia. And for me, coming back to Armenia means coming back home. And Armenia has always been home for me, and it will always stay home for me. And you never know, God might open opportunities for me in the future to come and live in Armenia for a long term. I would have to, we'll see what would unfold in the future in my life. But yeah, to come home to come to Armenia would always mean to come home for me.
Would you like to move to Armenia one day?
I would say why not? If I wouldn't say yes or no, because it's not an easy decision to make. I mean, moving houses these days it can be very difficult. You can imagine changing countries would be very difficult. But I'm always open. I would like to look on the brighter side of Armenia, and I always want to think, what is it that I can do as a young Armenian for the prosperity of my own nation? How the input might be small or big, it doesn't change my views. If I'm doing something small, it doesn't disappoint me or be discouraged. I always want to look ahead and see what is it that I can do, and what is like how can I encourage other diaspora Armenians to come back, even if that's through birthright or to come back and get connected with their roots, with their people. So I always want to look ahead and think of a prosperous Armenia in the future.
So Birthright, you're mentioning, that's the program you're on right now.
Mhm.
So could you explain a little bit about what that is and what you're doing here in Armenia?
Well, I'm actually very happy that there's an organization called Birthright Armenia. I think it was established about 14, 15 years ago. Um, it's a very professional, very good program for all the diaspora in Armenia. If you're in Armenia or born outside Armenia and you want to come to Armenia and volunteer from 4 to 12 months, I won't get too much detail about the program, but it's basically just come and bring your skills, whatever you are. You're a dentist, doctor, lawyer, mechanic, whatever it is that you are, and whatever set of skills that you have, you want to bring them to Armenia and volunteer. It's a very, very rewarding program. So that's what I've been here for 4 months. I volunteer with Aleppo NGOs currently. Right now, I'm with Aleppo NGOs, helping with Syrian Armenians, but I also have, I'm also thinking of going to maybe Artsakh or Gyumri, because we have an office in 4 different locations in Armenia: Gyumri, Vanatsor, Yerevan, and Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh. So I might go to Gyumri or Artsakh and work with orphans. That's one thing I would really love to do. And I also want to work with an organization called ARS, Armenian Relief Society, that help the wounded soldiers. As you know, we had the 4-day war, Ashi, and we have ongoing war, which is not being announced, but we have ongoing war with Azerbaijan. We always have wounded soldiers, so I would really want to go and spend time with them and help them and encourage them. So
It's really amazing.
thank you.
It's really, really great. Thank you for doing that work. Well, I guess I could ask you how it's been working with Aleppo NGO and how you feel connected to, if you do, your life back in Syria in any way through this NGO.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rewarding, is because obviously being born and raised in Syria, in Aleppo, Syria, a lot of work that I do when I go through files and I call people to update their files and stuff like that. A lot of times I take a file and I know the people, I know the person, I know the family, and that's just amazing. It makes me happy that I'm helping someone that I know. Even I know or I don't know, but it has a special connection when you grab a file and you want to help them, you want to give them help or whatever it is, and the family. So it's very interesting. And sometimes the girls, when I first came, they didn't know that I was Syrian Armenian. So when I came in, one of the first things that I did was updating files and calling them, make sure they're fine, and if they need anything. So I would say, yeah, I know this family. And yeah, I know like 5 out of 10 files that I would work on. I would know them. Like, and they end up saying, Nareg, who are you? How come you know so many families? But yeah, that's it's challenging. Sometimes you hear their stories. I mean, you call a family and say, oh, sorry, my dad passed away. And I didn't know, and I know the families. It breaks my heart. It's challenging. A lot of emotional roller coaster. You would call someone, they say, "Oh, sorry, person passed away 6 months ago, or the person went back because the situation was very difficult in Armenia. So the person went back and he put his life in danger because he has to work, and very like difficult stories to hear. So it's challenging, but it's also rewarding that I'm at least doing minimum that I can.
Thank you. Last question then, before I ask if there's anything that you want to add, will be like, what do you think that Armenia and the diaspora and just people in general can do more for Syrian Armenians? What do you think they can do differently?
First of all, I would say before we do anything, we can pray. Because every day I pray for my nation, for my people. The Bible says that prayer changes things. I'm strong in that. Before I do anything, I pray and I lift up my nation before God, and I ask God to have grace and mercy on us, because we endured a lot, we suffered a lot, we've been suffering for the last 100 years. So first thing I would say, I personally pray for my people, and after that, out of the passion I have for my people, the Armenian people, I would say anything that you can do, great or small, that would help not only Syrian Armenians, Armenians in general. I would say don't hold it back. Don't say that, someone else would do it. If we all think that someone else, we all say, let Anush do it, let Pani do it, let Hagub do it, let Kebab do it. No one will end up doing it. So sometimes that means that you have to make a decision. I had a good job in Australia. I was working in one of the biggest countries in my field, but I made a decision, and I said it shouldn't continue this way, and I quit my job, and I said I'm taking time off. It's time to give back, because the Bible says the joy of giving is actually greater than the joy of receiving. Receiving is good, it makes you happy, but once you taste the joy of giving, it actually is much greater. It's the best experience for me. When I came here and I started helping these people, sometimes it might be something that's too very small for me, but it means so much for them. And when I see the joy in people's eyes, when I help them in my eyes in a very small measure, makes them so happy. It makes me the happiest man on earth. So yeah, I would say pray for people if you believe in that, and secondly, do something, make a decision to do something good, and to be part of the prosperity of this nation.
Wow, thank you. That was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you haven't said yet that you'd like to add?
I think you've covered most of it, and because faith is something very important for me, I would also say that as a first Christian nation, we have to also be reconnected with our faith, and that's something very important for me as a person, because wherever you look in this country, you would see a church, you would see on top of every hill there is a monastery, and our forefathers took our Christian faith very, very important. Very importantly, it was they were not important. It was a priority in their lives, and maybe over the centuries, we started to be weak in that point. So for us to be reconnected to our faith as a Christian nation is what I would pray for, and what I would say that was something that we need to work on, along with other things as well.
How do you think people do that?
Obviously, how can you be reconnected with your faith is by going to church and reading the Word of God, and spend time with God in prayer, which is very important. So that's how I think we can grow in our faith, and putting our faith and trust in Him, and understanding the calling that He has for our lives as missionaries on this world, to go spread the good news of Christ to the world. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
No
Nareg.
problems.
I really appreciate it.
No worries. I'm glad. Thanks for giving me